I now look to Brian Wong, Pembroke College, to continue the case for the opposition.
A vast majority of populist leaders never get into the establishment for all of the reasons that proposition outlined above. A vast majority of these populist leaders remain in a perpetual opposition in calling out and acting as a critique to the inertia and the fundamental failures of the establishment. I want to bring forth three things in my speech today. First of all, why the previous speaker's new instrument to achieve institutional reform is only viable when you have populist pressure and critique urging the system to reform itself. Second of all, on a minutiae of examples of populist leaders ending up in government and why A, they don't tarnish our case at all, as Chinook said, but B, even if they do, they actually do bring a lot of positive changes I'll talk about. And third of all, why it is fundamentally elitist and epistemically disingenuous to say feelings don't matter, because the construction of reality or the imagination of only numbers and statistics and hard facts are reality is the precise reason why people feel left out and excluded under a Eurocentric regime that fundamentally neglected the interests of those who suffered at the peril of globalization. First though, let's talk about what exactly would the establishment look like in the absence of populist leaders. We think there are 5 reasons why they would not respond to people on the ground. First, if you're a single mother looking to claim your welfare benefits and you walk up to a government, the bureaucratic inertia would have you say, I'm sorry, come back 2 to 3 months later. We haven't quite sorted out legal documents for that just yet. I'm really sorry, single mother, but you know, I've got my paycheck and I've got my work to do and I don't really care about you right now because bureaucracy and the formalized institutions of government, the due processes they stand before on government side are the reasons why I can't help you, single mother. Or imagine you're a worker left over in a Rust Belt, left unemployed because of mechanization of labor. You go up to your leader and you say to them, please help me, I'm literally out of a job right now. And they say, well, according to macroeconomic theories produced by 1980s economists in the University of Rice in Columbia, there's no such thing as structural unemployment, surely. Until 10 years later, they realize, damn, there is such thing called structural unemployment, and millions of people are left out of job because guess what? They were too busy having the fine dining and having to catch up with a Winchester and eating mates in a bloody dining hall. Third of all, look, electoral gerrymandering and political manipulation, right? The reason why these institutions in the UK tonight is so messed up is because it's the first past the post system never lets those individuals who are not in marginal or non-safe seats or not in critical electorates to have the say to determine the governments that rule the UK today. That is why established parties never have incentives to pander to the incentives of those of the people on the ground, because they know they're going to win the election regardless of the most vulnerable people who are least likely to rock up to vote, least likely to know how to vote, and least likely to engage in a political process. Fourth reason, I've got quite a few more by the way. Recognize that the previous speaker said globalization is the way to go. But the moment when your elite's interests are connected to the globalized financial elite, that is when you become out of touch with the common people. Because when your interest is no longer grounded in people having a stable job and income on the ground, but instead to this macro financial institution of the bank, where you can have accumulators and fancy financial manipulation, that is when you as an elected elite politician, as part of the establishment, don't care. Why am I saying all of these things? The gist here is to say that the establishment, without populist critique and call out, doesn't change. Without the populist other to call out the fundamental issues in the establishment, doesn't give a damn at all. What do populist leaders do when they're not elected? 5 things here. 1, agenda setting and agitation. That when Jeremy Corbyn calls out Theresa May, and before that David Cameron on the question time, on debates, and calls out the fact that the government has systemically neglected those who suffer under failed NHS reforms and the attempt to scrap the NHS, this calling out process sets the item on the agenda. That's why you've seen the recent policy U-turns from Theresa May's government. Has Corbyn entered the government? Well, thank God not, right? But the reality is to note, there has forced policy U-turns from the most pernicious violations in the Theresa May's current government. That is an active, concrete, positive change that's happened. Second thing, galvanization. Right now, a lot of people don't vote because they don't believe candidates represent them, don't care about them. They can't find the people they care about to resemble them in the electoral system. Populist leaders say, look, you can trust me and you can vote for me. They often don't get in. But the electoral pressure and the threat and the feeling that places the establishment politicians under as though they feel that they might be threatened, that's when they respond. That's when then you see politicians going on the constituencies, not going on foreign trips to meet random prime ministerial candidates overseas, by the way, But it's about meeting people on the ground and hearing them in fundamental appointments and consultations what the needs are, because they care about the seat now that is populist contestation. And this is what populist leaders have done over many countries in the past. Thirdly, this exists independently of elections, galvanization of civil society. Because when Bernie Sanders, unfortunately never got elected, came up and ran in the election, he did more than just changing the establishment and political party. He galvanized the civil society. He made people recognize that there's an alternative to xenophobic racism and the capitalistic structures that permeate and benefit the interests of the oligarchy, that there's a third way, that unlike what Anthony Geddes or Bill Clinton promised with a third way, there's a legitimate third way on the ground. And that is important because what the civil society then does in recognizing this is charities, the philanthropies, the organizations on the ground, the grassroots mobilization. These are the actual changes that have emerged from Bernie Sanders. He inspires, he changes, and therefore he conquers. Not by in any second, he never entered the government, but these are the positive benefits he brought. Fourth of all, the idea of moderates. The analogy I'll use here is MLK versus Malcolm X. So Malcolm X was radical, he was extreme, he adopted tactics that were often anti-establishment. But without the urgency created by Malcolm X that forced the immediate response of the government, Martin Luther King would never have achieved as much as he did. And this is the analogy I want you to walk away from this room thinking about. Because populist leaders obviously aren't the policymakers. They might not be able to draft really complicated quadratic equations and whatnot. But these are the people that make the moderate counterparts to the ideals and policies look better. These are the people that influence and reform and shape the structure from within. That is where you get real change. Now, let's talk about what government brought very briefly. They said, look, I'm going to give you some examples of really bad populist leaders. There's 3 responses, actually 4, I'll give to that. 1, you want examples? I'll give you lists of positive populist leaders. Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, Emmanuel Macron, or JFK, right? Obama, right? These are all examples. How do you judge this? You judge this by listening to following 3 responses I have. 1, notice harms are real changes. I want you to walk away from this debate, look, noting that real and fake change, like real and fake news, is different from bad and good news or bad and good effects, right? When you vote against this motion, that doesn't mean that you believe populist leaders are always like Jesus or whatever you believe in, like kumbaya, but that these are the leaders that fundamentally, that these leaders have made an impressionable and important mark on the world. I'm not asking you to say they're saints because that's not true and that's a false burden, but to think about whether or not they actually have left a mark, that's the first response. Second response, I just want to point out, short-term economic growth, short-term economic solutions actually do work in many ways. That the fact they give the immediate security to someone to find a job and develop the skills such that when the long-term shock comes in, they can just at least shoulder up and have some capital to buttress that and weather against that. That is active change. But third of all, note, feelings and emotions, they say it doesn't matter. But I think it does, because you and I have different preferences. I might prefer to stay in the EU. I love the EU, by the way. You might think the EU is horrible. He might think the EU is, in the middle. So there's no epistemic reason why I'm superior to you, that my judgment of economic failure is the right way to decide objectively whether or not this country is going in a good direction or bad direction or in one direction, which is basically very bad direction, right? But the important thing to note here is, given such epistemic indeterminacy, the only right way to decide if a democracy is healthy is about whether or not people are engaging it, believe in it, and believe that the democracy can bring them the outcomes they need. This is what you get from populism, the promise of change, of hope. And when promises translate to feelings that galvanizes turnout, that is real outcome. That is not fake news. For all of these reasons, I'm so proud to oppose today. Thank you.